Welcome to our December Cabinet meeting. I have a couple of practical issues to highlight first. We have no fire drill planned tonight, so if there is a fire alarm, please make your way out of the building in a calm and orderly fashion as guided by staff. People with mobility issues should gather in the foyer on the right-hand side as you leave the Mancroft room, near to the balustrade, where assistance will be provided. Toilets are at the far end of the corridors, either side of the council chamber, ladies to the right as you leave and gents to the left. And just a reminder that this meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. So item 1, apologies. I have received no apologies. Item 2, are there any declarations of interest? No. Do you need to announce anything? No.
Just to be clear that all councillors have been granted dispensation for the budget papers and anything relating to that. It's a general dispensation. So if you have an interest that is over above any general dispensation, you will still need to declare it and leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. So we'll move on now to public questions and petitions. We've had one public question for this meeting from Grace Courtney on behalf of Women and Girls of the Common Lot. And so, Ms. Courtney, would you like to please come up and ask your question? Thank you and welcome. You can sit down if you like. Oh, you don't have to sit down. You can stand up if you like. You can do anything you like.
91% of streets that are named after people are named after men. In London, 87% of streets named after people are named after men. In Mile Cross, there are 37 streets named after men and only one after a woman. Norwich women have a proud history of making change in our city and beyond. Does Cabinet agree that one way to start to redress this imbalance is to name the streets on the proposed new Mile Cross development in celebration of Norwich women?
Thank you for that. And the short answer is yes, but I've got a longer answer to give you. The council works closely with communities and developers to ensure street names in new developments reflect the cultural and environmental heritage of the areas they're built in. There are a number of rules that must be followed when proposing new street names. For example, existing names must not be duplicated and very similar sounding names are not permitted to avoid confusion. Roads can only be named after a person when the person is deceased, and we're happy to consider requests for naming a road after a well-known local person, especially if they've worked hard for their community or have historical links to the city. With regards to Mile Cross, we would be very happy to consider naming the streets on the development in celebration of Norwich women. Previous examples of this elsewhere in the city include streets named after Elsie Bartram, Elizabeth Fry, Edith Cavell, and Patricia Hollis. We will review the recently approved plans and the street naming and numbering process will take in collaboration with developers, local community groups and other stakeholders to ensure that suggestions to new street names meet their aspirations and the criteria mentioned above. Did you want to ask a supplementary? I just want to say thank you so much for that. That was excellent. And I think tailor-made, penned for the, written for the occasion, it feels like. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And as I was saying, you know, we really do want to take seriously what you're asking and do everything we can to make sure it happens. I suspect that's a first. I was told it was at my discretion. Quite hard to say no, really, isn't it, when they sing so well and they've got such a good ask. So I hope you enjoyed that. But now we have to get on with the ordinary business. So moving on to questions to Cabinet members, none have been received. The minutes, item 5, the minutes, these have been circulated. There is an exempt minute, but can we confirm, please, that they are an accurate record of the meeting held on the 13th of November 2024? I'll propose them. Seconder? Yeah, multiple seconders. All in favour? Yes, that's unanimous. Thank you. So we'll move on now to item 6. This is the statement of licensing policy for sex establishments. Could I please ask Councillor Packer to move the report?
Thank you, Chair. This is a long-term aspirational policy looking to reduce the possible number of new sexual entertainment venues over time and not an immediate prohibition of these types of premises. Those currently licensed will be allowed to continue to trade, providing that they show good standards of management and comply with all the licensing conditions. The decision to reduce the numbers of SEVs to nil was based on the nature of the defined areas identified in the previous policy changing. The new defined areas include the introduction of residential premises and other sensitive uses, for example, schools. The remainder of the city is predominantly residential and of a residential character. The policy was consulted upon and presented to the Regulatory Committee. The committee agreed that the policy should be endorsed and recommended that Cabinet adopt it, with one amendment to the wording. So the change is to paragraph under section 4, so that it reads as, the authority intends to adopt a policy to limit the number of sex establishments in the city to nil. It recognises that there are a number of businesses that have been providing sexual entertainment in Norwich for several years. The authority will not apply this limitation when considering applications for premises that are licensed sex establishments with permission for sexual entertainment if they can demonstrate in their application. And then it follows on to some bullet points. So that's all I have to add to it, Chair, unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Packer. Do I have a seconder, please? Okay, Councillor Kidman. Would any other Cabinet member wish to speak, please? No, Councillor Jones.
Just want to say thank you for all the work that's gone into this, because it's been a long ongoing piece of work and quite a challenging one. So really glad we've got this in front of us now.
Thank you. There are no other questions, then I'll move on to questions from political group leaders that have been sent in advance. Councillor Galvin, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. So the question I think you've got already is, what measures are in place to ensure consistent application of the revised policy and conditions across all licensed establishments, and how the council will address any conflicts or challenges in enforcing those updated standards?
Thank you.
Councillor Packer. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Garvin. Since May 2024, the council has employed a full-time equivalent licensing enforcement officer. The post holder's role is to monitor compliance within all licensed premises throughout the city, including SEVs. Regular unannounced monitoring and compliance visits are carried out at these premises over the course of the licensed period. Any matters of concern are dealt with in accordance with the corporate enforcement policy. There are different courses of action available to the authority to deal with non-compliance with these conditions. These include informal action where the matter is not of a serious nature to the possible revocation of the licence if there are significant non-compliance matters or a serious single breach of a condition. Officers receive regular training and updates to ensure that they are consistent in their enforcement approach.
Yes.
Could I ask a supplementary?
Mhm.
Thank you. Will there be a change in that? So that's obviously what already exists, but will there be a change in that going forward, or will you keep under review the need for a change in that policy as our policy has changed?
I think you've hit the nail on the head with the last comment, because it is a policy. It can be changed as and when it's needed. So it will be potentially changed in time if required.
Thank you, Councillor Packer. I'll now move to the vote on the recommendations. Would you like me to read the recommendations? Selecting for them. Here we are. Oh, there we are. The recommendation is to agree the proposed changes to the statement of licensing policy for sex establishments following public consultation and adopt the final version of the policy under the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982. Can I see all those in favour, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. So we'll move on now to item 7, and this is under my name. I will move the report. It's a technical report, so I'm not going to say very much, but the guidance, the draft guidance was reported to Sustainable Development Panel earlier this year, seeking authorisation to commence the public consultation. That ran from the 29th of February to the 28th of March, and the guidance note has been reviewed and amended. This report presents the proposed final BNG guidance note for adoption, and the recommendation is to adopt the Biodiversity Net Gain Planning Guidance Note 2024. Do I have a seconder, please? Okay, thank you, Councillor Hampton. Does any Cabinet member wish to speak, please? No. Okay, I'll now move to questions from political group leaders that have been sent in advance. Councillor Galvin, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. So worryingly, the Norwich Biodiversity Baseline Study, which was several years in the making to help us understand the existing state of biodiversity in Norwich before mandatory biodiversity net gain rules kick in June this year, identified as a key conclusion that there are serious gaps in the evidence that impact the baseline. So identified a real data desert in the city, that we don't know enough about what we have. There is data, but it's old, it's selective, it's not at a fine enough level to work well for an urban assessment of biodiversity. What assurances can be given that there's sufficient data, ecological expertise and enforcement capacity in the planning department to implement biodiversity net gain meaningfully?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Galvin. The Biodiversity Baseline Study 2024 is predominantly a desktop study, which was undertaken to give a citywide understanding of biodiversity hotspots and biodiversity character areas to acknowledge the existing assets and pressures and areas for different biodiversity opportunities. It was not within the scope of that project to conduct detailed biodiversity surveys of every site within the city. However, detailed biodiversity surveys are regularly provided to the council as part of the submission of planning applications and will take place to inform the development of the Urban Nature Recovery Plan network, driven by the council's biodiversity strategy. The baseline study is proving a useful resource to identify areas of nature inequality in the city and will accompany other biodiversity studies currently under production or nearing completion. Such studies, for example, include the Local Nature Recovery Strategy being undertaken on a Norfolk and Suffolk-wide basis, and the Greater Norwich Green Infrastructure Strategy, which will launch in the summer next year and be formally adopted by the council as an SPD to the GNLP. I'm assuming you understand what those abbreviations mean. Further, the submission of biodiversity information will continue to be submitted to the council in the form of mandatory biodiversity net gain, as site surveys should be undertaken so that competent persons can complete the statutory biodiversity metric. This is needed to give an accurate baseline biodiversity value of individual sites, show the development impacts and proposals for net gain. These will inform reviews of the baseline study and in time provide a more full picture of biodiversity in the city. The council does not currently have dedicated in-house ecology resource. However, options for accessing resources externally are currently being explored. Officers have also attended training events on the implementation of biodiversity net gain. You have a supplementary?
Yeah, yes, please, I do. So actually, yeah, it was a desktop study, but actually, I read from our commissioning, it was produced by a county for city and published in February 24. It was a 186-page report, and its aim was to provide a baseline assessment of biodiversity in the city. Its purpose is to identify the factors threatening it and to present prioritised opportunities for enhancement. It's also provided an evidence base to produce a framework for ongoing biodiversity survey and monitoring, and presents information that can be used to inform biodiversity net gain, as we say, and supplementary planning documents. But it does say very clearly many areas have no recording, suffer from a lack of ground truthing, and found that there were some really problematic lacks in information. So I think it comes back to the fact that there's actually something that really needs to be addressed there. It wasn't simply a desktop study, it was the bedrock of how we're going to recover biodiversity in our city. So it's still like assurances that more resource, will you be planning to put more resource into that area so that we can have a bedrock that is meaningful and then take meaningful action as a result?
I mean, certainly we're going through the budget process at the moment, and clearly there is not provision within the draft budget for that. I think you make a reasonable point, and it's something that which I'm happy to go away and discuss separately outside the meeting. Okay, so we'll now move to the vote. Could I see those in favour, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Now, item 8 is the feasibility study in consideration of a Norwich affordable financial services strategy. Could I please ask Councillor Giles to move the report?
Thank you, and I'm afraid I do have a speech. 2024 marks the 100th anniversary of the first Labour government. Across the last century, the Labour Party's abiding principle has been to tackle inequality. Labour governments, through differing means, have used the levers of the state to engineer the redistribution that would gradually reduce the disparities in income, wealth and power that characterise British society. After 14 years of Conservative government, these disparities are greater than ever. The term poverty premium describes the significantly higher costs for essential goods and services that low-income households incur in their everyday lives, only exacerbating these inequalities further. This report shockingly reveals that the extra cost of being poor in Norwich is estimated to be approximately £10.6 million. For the 27% of Norwich households living in poverty, they on average pay an additional £460 more per annum for essential goods and services. These poverty premiums include, for example, higher home contents insurance, higher car insurance, and being locked on disadvantageous fuel payment methods and plans. They also include higher costs in access to credit, and that is the primary focus of this study. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, nationally, on average, across all low-income households, 29% have no savings or less than £200 in savings. This figure rises to 58% for those on universal credit. People may also be financially vulnerable due to unstable income, poor health, or unexpected life shocks, such as bereavement or relationship breakdown. Financially vulnerable residents thus sometimes require access to credit because they lack the savings to meet unexpected bills. However, 38% of UK adults are unable to access financial services due to their credit score, with over 20 million having inaccurate or invisible credit files. The Good Credit Index produced by Demos places Norwich significantly short of the mean level of access to affordable credit in the east of England. As such, many financially vulnerable residents feel forced to rely on high-cost credit options or illegal money lending. The outgoing Archbishop of Canterbury's war on Wonga had significant success in driving unscrupulous payday lenders out of the market. However, the demand from the financially vulnerable residents remains. The FCA accepts that official figures on illegal money lending are in all likelihood massively short of the reality, with a recent anonymous survey from Ipsos suggesting more than 3 million people had borrowed nationally from illegal money lenders in the past 3 years, only 1% of whom said they had reported their situation to a regulator. Data from the Money and Pensions Service suggests 20.3% of adults in Norwich have been identified as over-indebted. Data from NCAN shows that our financial inclusion consortium partners in Norwich are being presented with average individual debt levels of £9,365 compared to £4,678 12 months ago. However, for those unable to access mainstream credit, credit unions, financial cooperatives owned and run by their members do provide, in relative terms, an affordable alternative. Norwich has 2 credit unions available to all, Norwich Credit Union and Norfolk First Credit Union. There is also the Wherry Dragon Credit Union based here in City Hall for local government employees. Credit union loans are capped under legislation at 42.6% APR. General savers loans are offered at 19.6% at Norwich Credit Union and 26% at Norfolk First. If you save regularly with Norfolk First for 8 weeks, you can apply for a loan for up to double the amount you have saved. However, expansion possibilities for our credit unions in Norwich are challenging due to staff resourcing and an ageing volunteer base. In response to these challenges, the new Labour government is working on the production of a national financial inclusion strategy, as promised leading up to the general election, which will be published next year. Last week, a new Treasury committee chaired by Tulip Sadiq, Economic Secretary to the Treasury, had its first meeting, with a mission to contributing towards a strategy which will break down the barriers to people's ability to access affordable and appropriate financial products and services. The government have brought Fair for All Finance, Citizens Advice and the Money and Mental Health Institute into the heart of the Treasury to achieve this mission. Meanwhile, a government-backed pilot no-interest loan scheme delivered by Fair for All Finance, Toynbee Hall and Fair by Design is ongoing, working through 7 community finance lenders to disperse 0% APR loans to help individuals with no access to affordable credit, but need an affordable loan to spread the cost of essential or emergency items such as white goods or school uniforms. Norwich Credit Union made a successful £42,000 bid to Fair for All Finance, funded by government dormant assets funding to fund 4 of their 7 part-time staff. Norwich City Council will actively monitor national developments. Following the release of the government's financial inclusion strategy next year, following this study, we will be in a stronger position to actively explore bids in future rounds of government dormant assets funding money. Cabinet is asked to accept a recommendation in support of increasing the awareness of local credit unions and the services they offer. Furthermore, Cabinet is asked to formally adopt the unimplemented socio-economic duty in the Equality Act 2010, Section 1. The Equality Act was one of the last pieces of legislation put through by the last Labour government. However, the coalition government chose not to bring the socio-economic duty into force. The new Labour government has committed to bringing Section 1 into force, and this will place Norwich City Council ahead of the curve in formally assessing socio-economic disadvantage in our equality impact assessments. Cabinet is also asked to approve monitoring the impact of the poverty premium on Norwich residents, as per our commitment at September Council, through our annual equality information reports, commencing in 2025-26. Cabinet is asked to approve the following practical recommendations to seek to overcome the poverty premiums outlined in this report. Firstly, to seek opportunities to increase the take-up of our low-cost home contents insurance for HRA tenants. This study illustrates how Norwich has an insurance-based poverty premium of £2.017 million. Our home contents insurance for our tenants is as little as 40p per week, but with take-up currently low, raising take-up significantly would be a significant boost. Secondly, to review the use and effectiveness of our 0% APR homelessness prevention loans issued by our Home Options team to, for example, pay for private sector rent deposits to prevent residents experiencing homelessness. And lastly, to continue the work under our sustainable warmth strategy towards continuing to combat the scourge of fuel poverty. I must thank Nikki Bristow, our excellent Senior Financial Inclusion Officer, who has worked so hard on producing such an excellent study. And of course, thank Councillors Galvin and Haynes for bringing the motion on this topic to January Council. I'll finish with a quote from our former leader, the late Patricia Hollis, in her John Garrett Memorial speech in this Council 6 years ago. Poverty is constructed by us because we tolerate the inequality that constructs it and drives it. As we consider this study, I think it's valuable we reflect on those words as we seek to combat the poverty premium, and as that first Labour government did in 1924, work towards the Labour Party's enduring mission of tackling inequality and building a fairer Norwich. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for that. Very well said. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jones. Okay. Does any other Cabinet member wish to speak? None? Yeah, absolutely. How do you follow that? I think you said it all, Adam. I think you've got our full support for everything you said. So I'll move to questions from political group leaders that have been sent in advance. Councillor Galvin, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Adam, and thank you again to officers, especially Nikki Bristow, for all the work that's gone into looking into this really important area, which impacts so many people in the city and is hidden. The solutions to the complexity and misery of the poverty premium, where it costs more to be poor, are too often ignored by our society, as you said. There is a question regarding if option 1 provides sufficient action to address the urgent financial challenges faced by Norwich residents. Essentially, with the council opting to delay a more comprehensive strategy, will monitoring and incremental actions like adopting the socio-economic duty, obviously very important, and promoting credit unions meaningfully impact residents in the short term? Or are there risks that this option might be perceived as passive, especially given the immediate financial hardships that many residents face?
Thank you, Councillor Galvin, for the question and for bringing this topic. Given the budgeting challenges facing Norwich City Council at the present time, it is necessary to align actions taken involving significant expenditure with funding opportunities arising from the government's National Financial Inclusion Strategy, which, as I've said, will be published next year, and the review of the no interest loan scheme pilot. As I've said, Norwich Credit Union made a successful £42,000 bid to the previous round of funding, funded by government dormant assets funding to fund 4 of their 7 part-time staff. Norwich City Council will actively monitor national developments. And following all of the excellent hard work that has gone into this study, as I've said, we are now in a much stronger position to actively explore bids for future rounds of government dormant assets funding money, should they hopefully become available. Practical measures such as, for example, increasing the amount of our HRA tenants benefiting from our low-cost home contents insurance will have a tangible and meaningful impact in combating the poverty premium.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. A quick supplementary?
Yeah, very quick. Sorry, I just feel like I would like to, because I've obviously written that other question before, so I just want to respond more fully to what you said and say, yeah, having brought the motion to council and after that, I did do a lot of work helped by officers to flesh it out and put ideas together. So I'm really delighted and very, very grateful for all the work that's gone into it, and your creative and positive approach to taking forward the recommendations. The credit unions, when we're meeting them, they absolutely said what you said, that it's very, very difficult. They find it difficult to get enough clients. And one suggestion they had that was that we look at increasing funds held with them so that they can then make packages for loans for special items, and that will get them more clients. For example, warm homes measures. Would you be happy to meet and talk about that at some point?
I'm certainly always happy to continue meeting with the credit unions and having discussions in terms of our Treasury investment strategy. I think before we started moving depositing funds with the credit unions in Norwich, we'd clearly have to take that in response to a full strategy which assessed the viability of that and the risks associated with that, in line with the priorities in our Treasury management strategy. Obviously, we're looking to increase the amount of ESG holdings in our Treasury investment strategy, but we need to make sure those funds were sufficiently secure and liquid, because it's taxpayers' money.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. We'll now move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Item 9, Regulation 10A review of the Development Management Policies Local Plan. I will remove. I'll move the report. Again, it's quite technical. So the recommendation is to recommend to Council that it endorses the Regulation 10A review of the Development Management Policies Local Plan and agree to commence a full review of the plan following further clarity on national planning reform. And the purpose of the report is to review Norwich Development Management Policies Local Plan in accordance with Regulation 10A of the Town and Country Planning Act as amended. And we need to do that by the end of this year, this calendar year. The regulations introduce a statutory requirement under Regulation 10A that from the 6th of April 2018, local planning authorities must review their local plans within 5 years of the date of adoption and every 5 years thereafter. The purpose of this is to ensure that local plans are kept up to date and are responding to changing local needs and circumstances. The regulations state that where an authority reviews a document but decides not to update it, they must publish their reasons. So the review of assessment, there's a summary on page 188, and that's a summary of the table at Appendix 1, which assesses the plan's policies on an individual basis. Using a traffic light approach. So green means the policy is currently fit for DM purposes and no changes are required. Amber means the policy is still currently fit for DM purposes, but issues may have been identified and the policy may need minor alteration or further evidence may be required, and further review in due course is also required. And then red is the policy is not fit for DM purposes and requires urgent review. So The report on page 189 summarises the position, which is the majority of DM policies are considered to be fit for purpose for decision making, although a significant proportion of these have been identified as being in need of future updates to ensure they refer to the most up-to-date information to reflect changing circumstances and to correct any minor inaccuracies. 2 policies, DM14 and DM33, are no longer fit for purpose for decision making, as they are entirely out of date. However, these have been superseded by policies within the adopted Greater Norwich Local Plan. The report is asking that Cabinet recommend to Council that a full review of the DM policies local plan commences within the next year, but following the publication of any changes to the NPPF and publication of the likely content of the NDMPs, which it is currently anticipated that a full review of the DMP local plan would commence in 2025. The recommendation I've read to you, it is quite technical, so please feel free to ask questions. I might have to defer to officers, but do I have a seconder, please, for this report? Councillor Hampden. Thank you. Are there any questions from Cabinet members? No, everybody's content. I'll now move to questions from political group leaders that have been sent in advance. We have one from Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. Could you explain what specific steps will be taken to engage with stakeholders and the community in the lead up and during the full policy review? How will the council ensure that local developers, residents and other stakeholders are actively involved in shaping the updates to the DM policies? And to do this, will there be additional resources allocated to this process to avoid delays and ensure comprehensive consultation?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Galvin. Engagement for the full review of the DM policies local plan will follow the approach set out in the adopted Statement of Community Involvement, which is due to be updated early next year. This sets out the regulatory requirements for engagement and also the additional processes the City Council will follow. This includes methods such as holding workshops, contacting individuals and organisations, having hard copies of documents available at City Hall, using social media and the Council's website, and using other digital engagement tools such as Talking Norwich. At present, we are awaiting the publication of the changes to the National Planning Policy Framework and also the publication of the expected content for the National Development Management Policies. It is possible that a number of the development management policies will be superseded or no longer be required as a result of these national changes. Therefore, the next version of the DM plan could be narrower in scope and therefore a shorter document than the current plan. Without clarity on the national policy changes, it isn't possible to identify exactly the level of resource to progress this work stream at this stage. However, this will be needed to be identified and considered as part of future budgets and service provision when this information is available. Thank you. So I'll now move to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 10 is complaints and social care ombudsman and the housing ombudsman scheme 2023 to 24. I'm going to ask Councillor Kendrick first to move the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. The report is to provide information about complaints the Council has received for the period of the financial year 23-24 and those that have been investigated by the local government and social care ombudsman and the housing ombudsman. This report is for information and review. It is requested that the Cabinet ask scrutiny to add this item to their future work plan. The Council has a two-stage review process, and if the complainant remains dissatisfied with the second response from the Council, they can refer their case to the relevant ombudsman to investigate. The local government and social care ombudsman is appointed by the government to resolve complaints which cannot be resolved by the Council itself. The housing ombudsman is appointed by the Secretary of State. Their purpose is to enable tenants and other individuals to have complaints investigated. They resolve disputes, including making awards of compensation and other remedies where appropriate, as well as supporting effective landlord and tenant dispute resolutions. The table in the report shows the total volume of complaints received in the financial year 23-24 by the Council for Stage 1 and Stage 2. It shows that the volume has been investigated by both ombudsmen 65 in total that were received for the same year. 37% were not investigated because they were out of scope or not exhausted the council's process in the first instance. The appendix includes the annual Ombudsman report findings for the financial year 23-24 and outlines decisions made and improvements the council has agreed to make as a result of investigations. Note that these reports include investigations that have been completed by the Ombudsman in the financial year 23-24. However, the complaints they relate to may not have been raised in the same year, and therefore the numbers differ to the volume of Ombudsman inquiries received by the council. I'd like to ask my colleague, Councillor Jones, to refer to the Housing Department and the complaints.
And I believe Councillor Jones.
Thank you. So the Housing Ombudsman's in November published our complaints performance. This covers the period April 2023 to 24. I think it's important to note that of those determinations, over half the cases that tenants reported go back to 22, 23, and some go back even further. The Ombudsman has apologised for the delay in those determinations. We need to look at the context, the time in which these cases were issued for us as a council. Many of these cover a period of time when it was a challenging period for the housing service. We were mobilising Norwich City Services Limited, which I think we can all agree really is turning a corner now. We're engaging with the regulator over safety matters, which we've now resolved. We're of course sorry for the impact and any distress that this issues raised in our complaints process for any residents and how we handled those complaints during that period. I really want to highlight that both I and staff take all complaints incredibly seriously. We've seen a huge improvement in response time for resolution and learning lessons from complaints. Let me be clear, our current performance is not reflected in the situation set out in this support, as so much time has passed since complaints were made. I'd like, if I may, to briefly summarise the current situation. Last year, we peaked at open complaint caseload of 140. The open complaint caseload is now down to 51, which enables us to focus on improving quality of our complaints handling, as well as resolving the complaint, which is the most important thing. And if we go back a year, again, 45% of our stage 1 complaints were responded within 10 working days. Whereas looking at the last 3 months, we're now at 79% responded within 10 working days of being acknowledged. I think you can agree that's a significant improvement. The key focus on responding positively to complaints in good time and putting things right when we get them wrong. And our focus is to continue to improve as we go forward in the future. But Leader, I'd hope you'd allow me to just digress a little. Anyone who's attended a full council meeting will know that I never shrug responsibility or accountability and be frank in owning and acknowledging the need for improvement where appropriate. The housing service has been on a difficult journey over the last couple of years, but thanks to the effort of amazing staff, we're now seeing real progress, both in the main council and NCSL. Every day, our staff deal with enormous challenges. On the property side, it's ensuring that a large and ageing housing stock is maintained and improved. Within home options and tenancy and social behaviour, they face ever-increasing demand and daily working with some incredibly challenging individuals. Our staff are faced with behaviour including abusive language, threats and violence that's wholly unacceptable, but still they all continue to give their best and far more than I could hope with such amazing commitment to improve the offer to our residents. The passion with which our staff talk about the changes they're driving forward is truly inspiring. As portfolio holder, I never doubt their unwavering commitment to our residents. So I was appalled and, to be frank, devastated to see publications both in leaflets and in the press that are frankly misleading and scaremongering relating to this report. The purposeful misinterpretation of information is both detrimental to our tenants and our staff. Let me be clear, we're turning a corner in the services we offer, and the lag time on the Ombudsman's responses means the service we now offer tenants is most certainly changing for the better, both in terms of actual repairs and how we manage complaints, and I'm confident this will continue on a positive trajectory. I'd like to take this opportunity to return to and reflect on the Debate Not Hate motion that every councillor endorsed at the last council meeting. Truth is important. Misrepresentation, half-truths and lies to whip up a response for political gain carry risk and can be dangerous. Last year, both myself and several officers felt the consequence of a campaign based on misinformation. I would hope that opposition councillors who endorsed that campaign would have now reflected on their actions, but sadly, I see this is not the case. Our housing staff do not deserve to be so demoralised by political point scoring. What you might see as just an attack on me in the press impacts on our frontline staff. The work they do is important, so quite frankly, please back off them. I would like to respond to the unnamed opposition councillors who felt it was appropriate to question my competence as a result saw my photo appearing alongside incredibly inflammatory language they were using. I've had this portfolio for about 18 months. Many of these complaints predate my tenure as Cabinet Member for Housing. In these 18 months, we've been on a steady journey of improvement, and I know many residents are starting to notice this change. So if you want to say these things, please say them directly or put your name to them at least, but also reflect on the fact that this is more to me than politics. The housing people live in is critical to their mental and physical health and key to my values as a nurse. This is why I'm still here despite the lies, misinformation, at times intimidation. So quite simply, truth matters, and please reflect on the kind of politics we want. I can assure you that as a housing team, we're committed to ongoing improvement and always take on board the learning we need. We always want the best for our residents. We don't take this report lightly, but we need to consider its context. I would ask you as leader if we could, as maybe you would write on our behalf as Cabinet, to express our appreciation to the housing staff who I believe have been quite demoralised by some of the things that have been published about this, and show our appreciation for the progress they're making and the exceptional commitment they show to our tenants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'd first of all like to thank you for the enormous contribution you've made to improving the performance of the housing team, and we do see, and also in NCSL in terms of repairs and maintenance, and we do see massive improvements. We're on a journey. There's more to be done, but I think you're making significant progress. The other thing I would say is I'm more than happy to write a letter to staff in housing, thanking them for the contribution they make and the hard work that they do. As you say, they do very difficult jobs, and they are at the sharp end in terms of sometimes the behaviour of some members of the public, and we really do need to demonstrate to them that we value the contribution that they make. Clearly, even though the bulk of these complaints are a couple of years old, at least, and we have taken action and the situation is a lot better now, we're not complacent. We know there's still more to do, and I know you will continue working to make those continued improvements. Would any other Cabinet member like to speak, please? No, in which case we have questions from political group leaders or leader that have been sent in advance. Councillor Galvin, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you. Yeah, so as you've said, the issues of these reports go far deeper than complaint handling of the council, and they've identified many systemic issues within the council service areas which led to these cases being escalated in that way. The report for the item, however, doesn't mention those issues or how they're to be addressed moving forwards. What are the actions coming out of the item, and how is the council responding to the concerns raised? Apologies that you've kind of answered that already, but I've had to write the question before you wrote your speech, so you might have to repeat yourself a bit.
Okay, so the answer, either Paul or Beth, who'd like to pick it up?
Yeah, I'll try to do so if you wish. Yeah,
Double act is fine.
I'll add up. Reporting of outstanding complaints is shared with senior leadership on a weekly basis, and reports are published on our intranet each month for the workforce, as well as quarterly reporting of KPIs as part of the assurance reporting. The performance in terms of dealing with them on time has greatly improved, and year to date we are achieving our target. This is demonstrating that we are addressing issues about timeliness of dealing with complaints. The housing leadership team has a monthly complaints deep dive into cases to understand issues and lessons learned. In addition, there is a wider group discussion looking into complaints data in more detail and includes the Housing Allocation Service. The council provides training delivered by the Ombudsman on effective complaint handling, and all staff dealing with complaints are required to attend. In the new year, we will be providing more specialist training, including damp and mould and noise nuisance, that will further support complaint handling to respond effectively.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Just to add to that, when we're looking at the issues that are behind some of the complaints, I want to offer assurance that there are a number of different sets of data that we monitor very carefully to look at the trends, where services are going, where there's room for improvement. And there's a real forensic analysis of that that goes on a month-by-month basis to understand every single thing that we could possibly look to improve, and always pulling that to pieces. It's a real improvement journey, but there's a massive amount of commitment and buy-in to this, and it's looking at it from every angle, and seeing where we can make every small gain that's going to benefit our tenants. So yeah, just want to offer that assurance that it's an ongoing journey, but I think it's a journey that we're all incredibly committed to and making a lot of progress on.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Did you have a supplementary?
Yes, just a brief one. So just to say, the Ombudsman report is based on facts, and if they're 2 years old, they're still facts, and we might be on a journey, but as councillors, it is our job to ask questions on behalf of our residents, and we can't not do that. So I'm not quite sure. I'm not genuinely sure what you were meaning in your earlier speech, but we won't be able to not talk about people. It's good to hear that complaint levels are going down, but it's scant comfort, because in opposition during this difficult journey, we have repeatedly asked for scrutiny of what was going on in that time, and it's the same team that were in charge. Personnel may have changed. So if we could have a more detailed response, if it's coming to scrutiny, if that's what the plan is, which I think is what I heard correctly, it would be good to have a more detailed response around that. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I think I'll answer this, I think, on behalf of Councillor Jones. So I think the issue is where these complaints and this report has been presented by the opposition in the widest sense as being current issues rather than something historical, and it's been suggested that Councillor Jones was in some way responsible for issues which arose historically before she was a cabinet member, and indeed the word incompetent has been used. And I think it's being really clear about the timeline and who we're trying to hold to account here. So I think it's important that the opposition asks questions. Absolutely, it's important that we are held to account. Absolutely, but I think we need to be fair and reasonable about actually. In particular, in the case, for example, of Councillor Jones, how long she's been in the post and how old some of these complaints are. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. So let's move on now to, this comes round this time every year. The Treasury seems to come around quicker every year as well. The Treasury Management Mid-Year Report for 2024-25. Ask Councillor Kendrick, please, to move.
Thank you very much, Chair. It does indeed come round every year, and I'm sure we all look forward to it. This report provides details of the Treasury Management activities for the first 6 months of the financial year 24-25 and highlights compliance with the Council's Treasury Management strategy and policies which have previously been approved by the Council. This report was considered by the Treasury Management Committee on the 5th of November, who noted and endorsed the report for consideration and approval at Cabinet. The report recommendations ask the Cabinet to note the Treasury Management activities undertaken in the financial year up to the 30th of September, including the Q1 update in Appendix A, and recommends the Council adopt the report. Council has adopted the SIPA Code of Practice for Treasury Management in the Public Sector and the Prudential Code for Capital Finances in local authorities, and operates its Treasury Management activities in compliance with these codes. The codes place responsibility on members to review and scrutinise Treasury management policy and activity against prudential indicators. This report sets out a range of indicators and highlights that there are no breaches to alert you to. The Council remains significantly internally borrowed, and cash balances available for investment will continue to enable the Council to maximise its returns in the current interest rate environment. The Council's Treasury management activities continue to be monitored against the wider economic backdrop in accordance with the Link Asset Services and the Council's Treasury management strategy. I am pleased that this report illustrates the positive management of our cash balances and debt portfolio. I will endorse the recommendations set out in this report to this Cabinet.
Are you done? Thank you. I wasn't sure whether you'd finished. Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jones, I saw. Do any Cabinet members wish to speak? Yes, no. So we'll go to questions from political group leaders who have been sent in advance. Councillor Galvin, you submitted a question.
Thank you. Yes, the banking contract tenders have been received, and the Council is part of the tender review panel. It says on page 224. Given the important role of the banking sector in the transition to a green and social economy, what has the Council done to ensure social value considerations are weighted appropriately in this tender exercise?
Thank you. Councillor Kendrick.
Officers recognise the importance of the banking services tender process. The Treasury Management Committee has received regular progress updates and briefings throughout the process. The tender process was a joint procurement across all the Norfolk councils and was led by the County Council. The City Council officers played a key role in securing award criteria, doing a weighting to assess supply, environmental, social and governance submissions. Additionally, officers also ensured the statement of recruitment included a number of environmental, social and government criteria, including a net zero policy statement and a responsible investment strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. We'll now move to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to the HRA business plan and HRA budget for 2025-6, and I'd like to ask Councillor Jones, please, to move the report.
Thank you. So the HRA business plan is a key document for us setting out the spending and income projections for the next 30 years for the housing revenue account. It's essential that we have a viable HRA to make sure we continue to provide valuable services to our current and future tenants, and this needs to be sustainable. We are so proud to have retained so much social housing in Norwich, but we want to ensure longevity. The HRA business plan is crucial to achieving this. It's an evolving and it changes with the challenges we face and opportunities that present themselves throughout the year. And these challenges should not be underestimated. Most recently, we've experienced inflationary pressures. We've got regulatory requirements, and whilst we welcome those and embrace them, ensuring compliance comes at a cost. We've got pressures around rental income through rent settlement, and we've had previous rent freezes that left us with lower rent levels, which impacts available funding to reinvest in our stock and the cost of new technology. All this is set against the background of the need to drive down costs in the way we deliver our services. We must be ensuring we're providing value for money and maximising every opportunity to secure additional funding streams, particularly when we're talking about things like decarbonisation, but any opportunity that's giving us extra capital to invest in our housing. With all this taken in context, it means that we can realise our ambition of building more social housing, investing in our existing housing, which following our recent stock condition survey, we have a far clearer position to understand the level of investment it needs and to maintain and improve it, and crucially to decarbonise our stock going forward. Obviously, the business plan has its challenges, and we really need to take into account some historical factors that have fed into the new business plan. We've had previous rent caps, which had a long-term negative impact on the plan, with an estimated 81 million loss of income over the lifetime of the plan. From 2015 to 2020, there was a rent reduction that also added a significant burden to social housing providers. And then on top of that, our rents are historically at a lower starting point compared to particularly to housing associations. Our rents are still calculated using 1999 housing values, meaning that our rents are lower than other areas with typically higher property values. But all this has a significant impact on the amount of money coming into the HRA, and then that we can reinvest. To mitigate the above factors and to ensure that we have a viable business plan, we need to consider some further measures if we're going to have the ambitions that I think the people of Norwich deserve and the investment we need in our housing. We need to increase social rent levels by CPI plus 1% for the next 5 years for our existing homes. We'll be looking to charge social formula rent on new lettings for our existing stock. So this will still be at housing let at social rent levels. We will look to charge enhanced rent levels, but this, I need to caveat this, cap at local housing allowance at highest for specific new homes that are offering low cost and lower living costs, result as energy efficient standards. We'll be exploring additional rent models for new and reletting existing homes that are energy efficient, where there's a resulting cheaper overall running cost. So I think these changes need to be taken in the context of the level of investment needed for the HRA. We've got the significant amount needed for decarbonisation, and whilst we factored in that some of this money will hopefully come from grant funding from elsewhere, we've got to find significant amounts of capital to achieve that in the scale of housing stock we have, and we need to be ambitious around achieving that and really focus on it. So I think it's important not for these changes potentially around rent to be taken out of context. So I hope we can have no scaremongering. I'd like to highlight that it's the most energy efficient properties that will be at affordable rent and capped at local housing allowance, so far lower than what would normally consider an affordable rent, which is based on 80% of market rent. Norwich's version of that will be very different. Many social landlords like Norwich are already taking these measures to safeguard and reinvest in their existing stock, enable them to invest in new homes for the future. So these recommendations will ensure we can continue to have a viable plan. We want to be in a position to have energy efficient new homes, to be ambitious on our journey for decarbonisation, and ensure we have a comprehensive and proactive programme for investment in our existing stock, ensuring high quality homes. But these do come at a cost, and this will require significant capital investment to achieve all these elements. So this plan reflects some of the realistic changes that will help us progress on this journey, whilst ensuring affordability for tenants, maintaining a viable business plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Do I have a seconder for this report, please? Councillor Kendrick. Thank you. Would any Cabinet member wish to speak on the paper? Yes, Councillor Giles.
I just wanted to quickly add for anyone, in the press or opposition councillors that don't understand local housing allowance, etc. That does mean that capping rents at a maximum of that level will mean that those that are on benefits would have their rent fully covered by housing benefit or UC. I appreciate we all know that, but for clarity.
That's really helpful clarity, and it's really important to bring that out because that's a cornerstone, isn't it? Okay, if there are no other Cabinet members who wish to comment, then we'll go to questions from opposition group leaders. And Councillor Galvin, you have a question submitted in advance.
So yeah, that is addressed slightly by what you just said, Adam, but the critical concern that comes through very clearly in the report is regarding the balance between financial sustainability and the need to protect vulnerable tenants. And there's a potential tension between long-term or potential and existing tension between budgetary constraints and the social responsibility of providing affordable housing. So I guess it's a broad brush on really how we as a council ensure that council housing remains affordable and accessible to tenants, particularly in the context of reduced government funding and the current economic climate.
Councillor Jones.
The council has been a self-financing landlord since 2012 when the government replaced the HRA subsidy system. Under the new system, local authorities keep all the rent they generate from tenants to pay for improvements to existing housing and new builds, providing better services for our tenants. As a social landlord, our rent setting must comply with the regulator for social housing's rent standard. It sets the required outcomes of how we set and increase rents for all our social housing stock. We will always ensure our rents remain affordable in line with government regulations. The job of the HRA business plan is to ensure that it provides a guide to the health of the business in the short, medium and long term, and we will regularly revisit the plan to ensure that the business remains viable so we can meet the strategic objectives of the council. This revisiting work includes looking at socio-economic pressures whilst ensuring we meet the regulatory standards, including stock decency, safety and wellbeing of tenants, and meeting service delivery and accountability requirements. So I think Adam's already covered some stuff around that is why we're very clear around capping at local housing allowance. So we want it always to be, there shouldn't be an issue of affordability, but at the same time we've got to reach a middle ground where we can provide that investment in the stock. So we could have incredibly low rents, but then we'd have no money to invest in the stock. We've got to get that balance, and keeping it around, keeping stuff that is more energy efficient. So that's tenants are getting a gain there, but bringing that up towards the local housing allowance means we're starting to get that balance, and it makes the HRA more sustainable because we want this housing to be here for the future and the ability to provide social housing. If we don't make those changes and consider different models, then that would put the HRA at risk. And I think the implications of that in the longer term are far more significant.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. We'll now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Now we move to item 13, which is the Council's provisional 2025-26 budget and medium-term financial strategy.
Sorry, Chair, could I just interrupt and just, I believe I need to declare an interest for this in relation to my day job at the Henderson Trust. So I've been told.
General dispensation.
There's a general dispensation. Are you the chief executive?
I am, yes.
Yeah, and do you? I don't think there's any mention actually in this paper.
Not in this paper, but I've been told that in a briefing that there was a larger table which included reference to the Henderson Trust.
I think you're okay tonight, but when you get to the other one, you will need to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Matt. Okay, so pleased to say we're not in the same position as many other councils due to sound financial management over the last several years. Paul, would you care to introduce the report?
The financial challenges facing local government continue to be demanding, as demonstrated by the recent budget monitoring to the Cabinet. Demand for services continues to rise, whether funded by the General Fund or the Housing Revenue Account, with costs also being driven up by the impact of inflation. Norwich City Council is fortunate to be able to lean upon its good financial management over many years to ensure that the service delivery is protected and that new investments are made, in particular via the capital programme to support improvements and developments. Preparation of the budget proposals have been impacted by the change in government nationally and events unfolding globally. At the national level, the local government finance policy statement announced recently ahead of the local government finance statement, which is scheduled to be published on the 19th of December, has set out some cautious reasons for optimism. It indicated that the multi-year financial settlements will be restored from 26-27 financial year, accompanied by the implementation of the long-awaited Fair Funding Review, which will support a much-needed revision method of distributing local government funding. It's built upon other announcements being made, able to retain the right to buy capital receipts, the right to buy administration in general, and the aspiration to build significantly more housing in future years. Global events around the world have the potential to impact the costs of services, whether by the cost of energy or by the cost of trading internationally, and even the impact upon the Treasury management strategy, recognising that the local economy is now linked to the wider economic circumstances. Work continues on the proposals that will be submitted to consideration by Cabinet and Scrutiny Committee in January before the final recommended proposals are considered by the full Council in February. The approach to setting the budget for the financial year 25-26 has been underpinned by prudent financial growth that is demonstrated required, for example, because of contractual commitments or statutory requirements, while savings has been priorities in order to protect service delivery. To this end, the implementations arising from the recent local government pay award have been incorporated into the planning, while beneficial returns arising from Treasury management investments are being utilised to support service delivery and avoid cuts that would otherwise be required. While some investments, such as a stock condition survey of the private rented sector, are proposed, are time limited, funding is proposed from reserves rather than ongoing budget provision. The consequences of these considerations was that the budget gap increased from a level indicated in last February when the current budget was set, but ultimately the gap has been bridged. Subject to any last-minute changes or adjustments required as a consequence of the publication of the local government finance settlement next week and a council tax increase of just under 3%. The proposals related to the housing revenue account meant that it is anticipated to deliver a surplus in the financial year 25-26 of approximately 2.2 million to be transferred to the HRA reserves and utilised to support the provision of new homes in future years. For the financial year 25-26, rent increases will again follow the rent standard, which would increase rents by 2.7% and generate an average weekly rent of £2.62 for Norwich social housing tenants. As to the capital programme, there are some exciting investments in the pipeline, including some that are dependent upon the success of applications for grant funding, for example, in relation to parks and green spaces. In addition, there are investments that will support upgrades to the existing housing stock, add to the stock and improving homes for older and disabled residents. The successful bids for the Levelling Up Fund in relation to Slough Bottom Park will begin to see those outcomes. Some major projects are still being developed and currently not included within the funded capital programme, reflective of the early stage that they are in terms of planning. The Cabinet will be aware of the planned investments in the livestock market, City Hall and the market, which is hoped will become more tangible over the coming financial year and consequently reflected within the future updates of the capital programme. And I very much endorse your remarks, Chair, at the beginning of this report, in which you said that Norwich City Council has managed an excellent protection of its council services, and that is due to the very good financial management, both carried on by this administration and obviously helped with our excellent officers. So I very much ask the Cabinet to approve this report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hampton, let me see. Would any other Cabinet member care to speak? Wish to speak? No. Okay, so we'll move to questions from political group leaders, and we have a question, Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. On page 261, the purpose mentions conversations with Norwich residents, businesses and stakeholders. Presumably this is a consultation on the budget. Last year this sheet achieved a low response rate. What's the strategy for this year? Who's going to be included?
Thank you very much, Councillor Galvin, for that question. We will be hosting the financial year 25-26 citywide budget conversation on the Council's consultation engagement platform, Get Talking Norwich. This is due to go live on December the 12th and will be open for feedback until January the 12th. As a wide-ranging multi-channel approach will be taken to encourage as many people as possible to contribute their views. And this will include the following: text alerts to 120,000 residents or service users, direct emails to about 4,000 residents and service users, articles in the winter edition of the Citizen magazine distributed to 68,000 homes, of which I received mine today. Social media campaign, email to partners, businesses and community groups, video promotion, news articles published on the Council's website, news release to the local media, direct email to all elected members after consultation go live, council-wide emails to staff and the intranet article on CityNet.
Quite a long list. Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. Okay, In which case now we'll move to a vote on this item. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 14, routine item, the renewal of Microsoft licenses. This is you again, Councillor Kendrick, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. The purpose of this report is to delegate to the Executive Director of Resources the authority to award a contract for the Microsoft licenses for the period of from April the 1st, 2025 to the 31st of March, 2028. Microsoft licenses are required to operate all Windows-based devices such as laptops, tablets, PCs, and servers, and to operate council services including our telephony and service availability for customers online. The current 3-year agreement to procure Microsoft licenses expires on the 31st of March of next year. The recommendation to award is because the current 3-year engagement expires then. And without those licenses, the core elements of IT would not be available. Contract up to the value of the budget allocated.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. Do I have a seconder, please, for this item? Councillor Giles, thank you. There'll be no questions from political leaders on this item. Does any, I should say, first of all, does any Cabinet member wish to speak? Forgot to say that. No, I didn't think you would. In which case, we'll move straight to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Unanimous. And then finally, item 15, the fire door replacement programme. May I ask, please, Councillor Jones to move this report?
Thank you. I'm pleased to recommend the approval of 4 contracts for the replacement of fire doors across high-rise blocks and other areas, so total over 4,000 doors. It's important to stress that when the council became aware of the issue of the doors, action was taken to introduce interim measures, such as installing secondary alarm systems. Throughout this, we've been in regular communication with the Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service. We take the safety of our residents incredibly seriously, and risks such as fire, gas, electrical safety, amongst others, are very closely monitored with confident levels of assurance. In terms of the procurement itself for this programme, this has been done through by approaching framework providers who are promoting fire safety works, and have contacted several manufacturers of fire door sets to understand the testing regimes and that products are compliant with fire safety requirements. 16 tenders have been robustly evaluated and moderated based on a 60% quality, 40% cost evaluation. All are evaluated on submission of experience, accreditation, customer care and delivery modelling. 2 suitable contractors are recommended to enter into contract with. The installers are accredited fire door installers. I'd like to highlight the rigour of this process, particularly in terms of the quality of doors we'll be using and confidence in the meeting the requirements for our tenants. Also about the contractor, it's very clear how seriously the contractors take the installation process, with the rigorous scrutiny, both in terms of how they're going to be monitoring this to maintain their certification, but also the scrutiny we'll be putting in place. In terms of how the council will manage these works, the Property Services Compliance Team is accountable for the delivery of this. Will ensure, in addition to the measures cited in the contractor's bids, which highlighted via the fire safety manager to have regular documentation and evidence, including step-by-step assurance and certification process, weekly briefings on progress to date and site visits, random site visits and updated risk register. Customer care is a high priority for both the contractors, who demonstrate experience, awareness, and understanding working with vulnerable residents. I think this will be particularly important in terms of ensuring we're able to gain access to all relevant properties, and the contractors have highlighted having flexibility to work around and engage with our tenants, minimal disruption. Leaseholders will not be charged for these works. This is about safety, and all doors that need to be replaced will be. Cost cannot be a factor in this. The council will ensure there is a communication plan in place so all residents are aware when the work will start and all necessary detail. And of course, we'll make sure ward councillors are engaged in this as well. I think one of the things that came across from the contractors we're looking to use is what importance they place on communication and the track record they got on that. And I think for getting residents to engage with the process, that's really important. So I'm really excited that we're able to move forward with this finally now and get this sorted. So I recommend this to Cabinet.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more with you, Beth. Do I have a seconder for this, please? Councillor Giles, thank you. There is a below the line element to this report. Does anyone wish to speak on the exempt item? No, okay, in which case we don't need to go below the line. Does any cabinet member wish to speak on the item above the line? No, we're all content. I think we're all really pleased that this is happening. It's been a while coming, but you've been working really, really hard on it, and we've got there, I'm pleased to say. So there've been no questions from political group leaders, so we'll move straight to the vote on this. All those in favour? That's unanimous, and that is the end of the meeting. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to all our viewers, or two of them,
Your viewer.
if we're lucky.